I'm Bob Bonner, I'm the curator of the Greater Manchester Fire Service Museum at Rochdale Fire Station, and along with my colleagues I'm a retired firefighter and this is what we do. The museum's been open for 30 years and we did various amounts of length of career. I did 40 years. The museum's been here for 30 years and my colleagues have done something similar. So yeah, Rochdale had a fire engine called Leaping Lena, as did Liverpool and one or two other places. But that would be in Rochdale Borough. The strange thing was with the AFS, they were mobilised from the 3rd of September 1939. They started recruiting in 38, 39. When the war broke out, they were sent to the stations and they started working, being on duty at night or in the evening, waiting for an air raid. There was no air raids for months and months. It was well into 1940 before the first air raids began. So these fellas were spending night after night in these little fire stations doing very little except playing darts and things. They were derided, they were quite disliked by the general population who thought they were dodging the column and all this kind of stuff. While I mean there'd be some neighbours would be in France or somewhere fighting and Fred, who was in the AFS, would be spending his nights playing snooker. So this went on for months until the bombs started falling and then these people became heroes overnight. Now, of course, before the Second World War, every single town had a completely separate fire brigade. There were 1,600 fire brigades at the start of the war in Great Britain, and most of them didn't talk to each other. So they were completely unconnected at all, not joined up, and that proved to be a problem during the Blitz. The whole war effort was massive, and the fire brigade was part of it and hoped that they got their stuff. But the fact was that with so many improvised fire engines, the fire brigade really wasn't equipped as well as it should be. Now, after it was nationalised in 1941, there was a massive programme of building new fire engines. They were only austerity fire engines, but they were new and they were built by the thousand, and most of them lasted into the 50s and 60s. But they were replaced all these old cars and hearses and limousines and things with better towing vehicles. Because what happened in the Blitz, these things broke down. They weren't reliable enough. They weren't made to be putting fires out in city centres and, you know, driving across rubble and that. These were somebody's nice car 2 years earlier. So they didn't stand the pace, you know. And then when they got the newer vehicles, that was the intention to replace those. The way I understand it was the water supplies failed because they were blown up by enemy action. I've never heard the story about 5th columnists, but fire brigades certainly suffered from lack of water in the Blitz, mainly due to bomb damage. They had to improvise ways to deal with that. I mean, they brought hundreds of fire engines from all over the place, and one of the problems was they came in from all different towns. They all had different kinds of equipment. Hose parts wouldn't join together. A hose part from Rochdale wouldn't meet a hose part from Manchester necessarily. But they had to find ways of making sure that the next air raids they had water for. So some of the buildings that were blown up were cleared out and just left the basement, which was converted into a water tank. And there would be whole static water supplies, as they called them. In London, they used to sink barges in the Thames, and it essentially made a little basin full of water. So when the tide went out, the boat was still full of water, and that was their way of dealing with it. And then they built concrete tanks and put them in the street and all sorts. There may well have been some 5th column work. I've not heard that story before, but there's certainly enemy action. I mean, every town's got a different story, but they're all in the same vein, you know, and they're all about this kind of improvisation and the problems they had, lack of communication and everything. People rallied round the firemen, and even in peacetime, in our day, people would come out in the middle of the night and brew up for you and things like that, you know. And in the days when it didn't matter if the fireman had a drink, you get a pub and give you a drink, you know.